and welcome to this week's webinar. We are really happy to have you all here. My name is Maria Reyes, and I'm a student from Microverse. I am here with Radwan, who is going to be my co-host this week. And we also have a very special guest today, which is Jason. Welcome, Jason. We're going to introduce
Thank you.
a little bit later. So first, Radwan is going to talk about the school, Microverse, and what the program is about. So I give it to you.
Hey everybody, so my name is Radwan. I'm a full-time student in Microverse, which is a coding school for software developers, where you can study the latest web technologies like HTML5, CSS, Ruby on Rails, React, and it's full-time from 8 to 5 usually, and you have a coding partner to do pair programming and a mentor, and it's very interesting. So every 2 weeks or so, we organize webinars like this with guest speakers like Jason, and we invite you to join us. So, Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I see that everyone is saying hello in the chat. We can say where are you from, maybe, to start things up a little. And well, before I let the microphone to Jason, I will like to remind you all that during the talk, you can ask any questions that you like in the Q&A section. And once the talk is finished, Radwan is going to address them, and we will get as much as we can. We have a very limited time, so
Sorry?
this is, yeah. Wait a second, we have a little problem here. Well, we'll continue. Jason, it's from Ecosia, which is a very great company because they plant a tree for every search you do in their browser, which is really great. And Jason, I will hand the microphone to you, and we can start. Hey, Jason, can you hear?
Hi there. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. Oh, good. I'm so sorry about that. I live in a pretty old Berlin apartment with really terrible internet. I'm so sorry about that. But I hope that's much better now. Yeah, you can hear and see me okay?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. Excellent. Hello, nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Jason. I'm originally from Canada. I grew up right near Niagara Falls, sort of outside Toronto. But now I live in Berlin, as I just mentioned, and you can see from the map of Berlin behind me. I have been a software developer for about 4 years now. But I wasn't originally a software developer, as the kind of tagline from the event told you. Before becoming a developer, I did a lot of different things. I was originally a musician. That's what I went to university for. I played the saxophone, as you might have seen in photos or something of me online. And I So I did a degree in jazz performance. I spent 4 years at university pretty much just playing jazz all day with my friends, which was really, really fun. But I also did some other jobs to help pay the bills during that time. So I worked, for example, as a tour guide in a bunch of different cities. I worked as an ambulance driver at one point. And then for several years, I did tech support. I worked in the Apple store, fixing people's computers and things. And that was sort of my way into technology. Um, but yeah, so I think it's interesting maybe for hopefully for me to share some of the ways that the other kinds of work that I did before becoming a developer has been relevant in my career as a developer and helped me on my career, which I think is hopefully true for many of you as you change careers from whatever it is that you may have done before into technology. Shall I continue? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I can't. I'm. Yes. From the poor internet. I'm looking at. I can't always see the chat at the same time. Okay, I'll just carry on. So um, when I was, let me just explain how I became a developer in the first place. Um, so when I was working in my job at the Apple Store, doing loads of different various tech support things all day long, I kept, and hopefully, I mean, I imagine this is maybe a story that some of you have found yourselves in that led you to programming as well. I found myself doing a lot of the same thing over and over again, and I'm, as a person, incredibly lazy. And so I just got really bored by having to do repetitive things. So I wanted to find a way of automating some of the more boring parts of my job so that I wouldn't have to do them all myself. The best programmers are lazy programmers. So I ended up writing some small scripts and tools just to make my life a little bit easier during that tech support job and then the next tech support job as well, which turned into more of writing command line tools to automate whole things, even to the point where I can't be certain, but I believe that when I quit, not the Apple Store, but the job I did after that, my last tech support job, I'm pretty sure they didn't hire anybody after me to replace me, which is a nice compliment for the little bits of code that I had written. Um, but as soon as I started coding and I was kind of learning more about the tech industry, I got really interested and I wanted to explore more about what careers in technology looked like. And I ended up applying for a coding, like a computer science education. So I was living in London at the time in the UK, and I looked into applying to a couple of universities in the UK offer what they call conversion master's degrees. And it's not really so different than some kind of boot camp educations. It's basically tends to be a 1 year full-time education. And it's a master's degree, but it is a lot of the fundamentals of computer science and some coding practice. And it was a lot of like writing applications and tools, and but also some of the sort of classic CS fundamentals like data structures and algorithms. Um, but for me, I think if there had been a really compelling boot camp at the time, I might have been interested in it. But I have quite a few friends who have become developers through self-study and self-education, and I have so much respect for that because I'm just not the kind of person that could do that. I really needed some kind of structure and kind of regularity to my learning. I don't think if I had just taken a year off and studied by myself, I would have been able to do it so much. I'm just not that kind of learner. Although I guess that is a big part of what I do now is just learn different technologies on my own. But for some reason, the idea of trying to study to become a developer all on my own was a little bit daunting. Yeah, so I started at UCL and I spent 1 year working there. And what I think is most interesting when I reflect on my education there is the things that were taught to me in class, the data structures and algorithm stuff, were really important for my first job, but have been sometimes really not that relevant afterwards. But what was really relevant that I learned during that year was just the being embedded with a group of people that were all interested in the same things that I was interested in. And a lot of the kind of inspired coding that I was doing outside of class, when I just started to realize that if there was something on a computer that I thought would be cool, I could just make it. I had the power. I could just start typing, learn the technology, and make the thing myself. And so during that year, there was loads of small little tools and things that I made, little bots to invite people to Slack groups and just hooking together bits of different APIs, just because I sort of all of a sudden felt um, uh, this opportunity to just go and run and code things myself, and all this automation possibility, and was really inspired during that time. And I think that was in some ways the most exciting part of the of my study, and in particular being able to share that with other people. I remember, I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but I remember very vividly my first day at university, um, when I met some of the other students that were going to be on the course with me. And at that point, I hadn't really had any other friends that were coding or interested in coding at all. And I just remember we just, I don't know, 4 or 5 people went for coffee, and we were just sitting around and chatting. And one person was talking about some, API, and they were like, oh, but I can't figure out how to decode the JSON. And then somebody else was like, oh yeah, and I'm dealing with Python 2 to 3 and the changes with print and strings. And I was like, these are my people. This is the first time I had ever talked to people about coding out loud. And it was just so inspiring to get to hang out with people that were doing the same kind of thing I was and interested in the same kind of things that I was. And the community part really, really helped. And that's what kept me working on little projects throughout the year, and eventually became a really big part of when I was applying to other jobs and trying to get into my kind of first steps of my career, was not just being able to talk about what a binary tree is, but being able to say, and here's a problem, and here's how I debugged, and here's how I coded a solution. And so that, I guess, leads me a little bit towards how I got my first job in technology, which was at the very large tech company, Booking.com. At Booking.com in Amsterdam. So I ended up, after this degree, I applied for Booking.com and moved to Amsterdam when I got the job. The interview process at Booking.com is a little bit the whiteboarding style, Google style interview, where you have to sit in a room with a blank piece of paper and a pen, and they say something like, how do I find me all of the elements that exist in both arrays? And I went, and in fact, the first time I did this, I failed. I completely failed. I guess if some of you are developers, then you know there's maybe a naive, a simple solution to this problem, and then a more elegant solution. And the simple solution is to do a double loop and loop through both arrays, which is not very efficient. And so the first time I went for this interview, I just couldn't get past that simple solution at all. And the interviewer very kindly said, you've got a lot to learn, but you should apply in 6 months, which I realize now, I think a lot of people say or take as a sort of, okay, get out of here kind of thing. But I was naive. I didn't know that. I thought that meant apply again in 6 months. So I did. And I studied up and I worked on some of the things that had been talked about in the interview. And 6 months later, I applied again. And that time when I did the interview, I was a lot more prepared. I got a very similar question the second time. I was able to articulate it more clearly. I was able to explain my thinking and my reasoning. And one of the most difficult things about interviewing, which I have noticed a lot as I now have started coaching more people who are trying to become developers. So I've volunteered for several years now trying to coach people in both like the very early stages of learning about technology, and also maybe a little bit later when it comes to practicing for interviews and trying to learn how to get a job. The hardest part about interviewing for a tech job, I think, is not so much being able to know the technology really confidently, but being able to communicate what your thinking is and why you're doing a certain thing. And this is something where I think people who have a non-technical background, it can really help during this process. I think if you come in, if you kind of go to university when you're 18 and go and get a computer science degree, and then your first job, you try and get a job as a developer, you don't have any extra kind of secondary experiences to draw on, and you might be really great at the coding part, but when someone kind of goes, yeah, it's kind of like when you're a kid and there's a math test and the teacher, you get the right answer, but without writing any of the work. And the teacher says, we get 1 point for the right answer, but no points for showing your work. And you go, well, I got it right. And they go, yeah, but that's not the point. And annoyingly, I mean, with coding, sometimes it is the point. But I think both in technical interviews and honestly in professional life as a developer, the point is not just to get to the right answer, but to communicate your thinking along the way. I think a really easy way to phrase this is just code isn't written for the computer, it's written for other humans. Code is a language that we use to communicate to each other, that we use to communicate our thinking. If code was a language written for computers, we'd write it in machine language, but we don't, and we write in very high-level languages, and there's a reason why. It's because it's easier for other humans to understand what our thinking was when we write with more high-level constructs. So being able to express yourself and communicate is not only a big part of being a developer, it's sometimes the biggest part of being a developer, is not just being able to code the solution and ship your code, but being able to make sure that what you leave behind is understandable to someone else who isn't you, and not only just isn't you, but isn't you today. I don't know if any of you have had the experience, but I have this all the time where I open up some code and I'm reading it and I'm going, this is completely I can't understand this at all. This is crap. This is terrible code. Who the hell would have written this kind of junk? No one can understand this. And I look at the Git blame and I see, oh, that was me. And sometimes it was me 2 years ago, but sometimes it was me last week. And so it's such an important part of being a developer, being able to communicate your thoughts. And so when I think about things in my career that help me be as good at that as I can be, it's experiences like being a tour guide and having to explain the history of some monument. It's being a jazz musician and having to introduce the band and explain the joke in the title of a tune. And I think in particular, when I think about times which are part of being professional life as a developer is not just sitting down at your laptop and coding for 8 hours a day, as much as sometimes it feels like it would be nice to be. We work in teams, we work together with other people, and working on a team as a developer is a lot like other social work environments that you might have participated in before. For me, it feels quite a lot like playing in a band, where overall you have roughly the same goal, but everyone's got their opinion on the best way to get there. Everyone's kind of got their own motivations on what makes the most sense. And everyone's trying to work in the same direction, right? We hope. We're all on the same team. In the band, we're all kind of trying to make music nice and sound good, for example. But maybe I'm a saxophone player, and so I've got a big ego, and I really want the biggest solo. But the singer that's with me is like, oh, no one cares when the instrumentalists are just playing. They only care about when the singer is singing. And there's a little bit of real-time live negotiation that's happening to try and make sure that we're doing something that is kind of fun and sensible and enjoyable. And that also comes into the social dynamics at play when you work professionally, I think anywhere, but especially as a developer, where you're not just communicating by talking to people, you're also communicating by what you leave behind. I think another aspect, I mean, this was a big part of when I was applying to try and go into my master's degree. I had to write a letter explaining why I thought I would be a good person to go on this course. And the reasoning that I gave was, it might sound a little silly, it might not sound like it makes a lot of sense, but in a way, developing coding is a lot like playing jazz. Jazz is an improvised music. You don't tend to pull up the sheet music and play exactly what's on the sheet. You pull up the sheet and it's got some rough guidelines, and you and the people around you are improvising and playing around and doing roughly, you have a sort of shared knowledge, a shared understanding, like a shared background, so you can reference the same things. But what you're doing, you're coming up with in the moment, it's new, and it's very open-ended and up to you, but within some constraints. And I think coding is a lot like that, because there are 1,000 ways to solve any problem, maybe more, probably more, most problems. There are many, many, many ways to solve any given problem. And I think a lot of work as a developer comes down to decisions like, should I write a for loop or should I write array.map? Should I break this up into separate functions or should I have it be one big long function with comments for each section? And these kind of things are, they all functionally work the same. And in some cases, there's performance optimizations we can make. The computer will care about the difference. But in a lot of cases, we have such great tools now as developers. Compilers, for example, are really good at figuring out what the most efficient way to execute something would be, that actually it makes no difference if we write a for loop or if we write array.map, because the compiler will execute it in the exact same way. The only difference is the way we want to communicate our thoughts to somebody else. And that's a lot like improvising music, because there are these constraints. You know, when I'm improvising in jazz, there are set keys, for example, or chords that we're trying to improvise along with. But we have some freedom to try and communicate how we feel within those bounds. And that's something that I definitely carry over, I think, from my experience as a musician into my career as a developer, which helps me with coding, with communication, and hopefully with my work and my career and my life. I don't know how long we want to leave for questions, so I'll leave a little bit more time. I love my career as a developer. I've gotten to do some really amazing, really cool things, some great projects, working on big scale things that are being used by tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And so early on in my career, I just worked really hard trying to get lots of experience working on big scale systems, learning as quickly as I can, taking on the hardest problems I could, and just learning and learning and learning until I could solve these really hard problems. And now that I have that experience and I have some knowledge and expertise to share, I get to do really cool things like work at Ecosia, this amazing company where the work that I'm doing can sometimes literally be measured in trees planted in the ground or in CO2, carbon taken out of the atmosphere. And I get to sit around at my laptop all day with my cat climbing on my keyboard, but the work that I'm doing is contributing to helping fight climate change, which I think is one of the most important things we can be doing right now. And I'm really glad that the work that I put in other careers earlier in my life and also in earlier on in my development career has led me to a position where I can contribute in the way that I do as a developer at Ecosia. I think hopefully, I know I've been rambling for a really long time without taking a break. I'm going to take a breath. I don't know how long you wanted to leave for questions. Let me pull up the chat so I can take a look at what everyone has been saying. Oh, some lovely comments here.
If you want to. Oh, do you hear me? I think he's having a little connection.
Yes, I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, so Rad, do you want to do that?
All right, thank you, Jason, for the amazing talk. So we have some questions from the attendees in here. There is a question from Julio, who's asking, how much did it take you to feel comfortable coding?
When I feel comfortable coding, I'll let you know. I think everyone always feels uncomfortable coding in a way. I think you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes, and you have to put yourself out there and try new things that are hard. I think, you know, when I work with developers who are a bit earlier in the career and are trying to level up their skills, like I was just a few years ago, I try and think about the difference between, people sometimes use the phrasing like, do you have 10 years experience or do you have 1 year's experience 10 times in a row? And I think if you get to a place where you're really comfortable and you do something that you really know how to do and it's super easy to you, then you end up doing the same year of experience over and over. And part of what I love about being a developer, about technology, is that the stuff I do tomorrow is almost certainly not what I did yesterday and possibly something I've never done before. So part of, I think, what I really love about the field is that I get to learn and do something new and challenging all the time. So on one hand, it took me, I'll say it took me a couple of years, maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say, because if I worked on a small isolated thing for 2 months and I felt really comfortable, I knew everything about that code. But sometimes I've worked on the same thing for 2 years and I still feel like I'm just getting into it. I'm only scratching the surface. But the important part is that I'm not trying to find a small bit and just know everything about it and then just leave it there, but always trying to grow and expand. And I think the thinking about things that I've done in the past that have made me comfortable with that level of discomfort, if you like, there are certain careers that all of you may have had before. For me, for example, when I was working as a tour guide, I had to stand up in front of dozens of people and tell stories and explain things. And sometimes I wouldn't really know what I was talking about. But the important part is to weave it into a narrative that tells a story and can help people be engaged. And that's an uncomfortable thing to do. But the more you practice, the more comfortable you get. So I would say to answer, like, you're going to be uncomfortable, probably always, but try and learn to be comfortable with that discomfort.
All right. Um, we have another question from the chat. Was it hard to start a career about technology without having a college degree or course?
This is one that's hard for me to answer because I had a bit of an advantage. So first, I had a degree in music. So even though it wasn't a computer science degree, I had a degree of some kind. And I think in lots of cases, especially for me, I'm Canadian, I've lived in the UK, I've lived in the Netherlands, and I now live in Germany. And for better or for worse, a big part of being able to get visas to live abroad in other countries is having some kind of university degree, even if it's not in the specific field that you're working on. And then I think the other thing is I did go to a university for my computer science re-education. And sometimes I'll say after my first job, no one cares. No one, am I allowed to swear? No one gives a shit about what my university degree was. Once you've got a year or 2 years experience, they don't even look. They're not even making it that far into your CV. They're looking at the work experience I've done and the projects I've worked on, the technologies I know. They're not even reading far enough to see whether I went to university. But for that first job, it helped a bit. But again, I think it helped me get my foot in the door. It didn't help me pass the technical screening. And it certainly didn't help me pass the personality interviews, culture fit interviews, where they're checking to see what kind of person I would be like to work with. So I think it's hard. It was hard for me getting my first job being a junior developer at 26, and all the other junior developers are 21. It's even harder. I know I have some friends who are, for example, 30 or 35 and going into their first job as a junior developer, career changes, second, third, fourth career. And I definitely see that that's kind of uncomfortable in some cases, but I think the important thing is to have the motivation to learn, to keep trying to level up your skills and get better and be able to talk with people who have computer science degrees on the level that they talk to each other, right? Be confident enough and educated enough to jump in and be part of whatever conversation is happening.
All right, I see. And there is a question from Geronimo. So he's saying, in short, how was your day today until you said, I'm able to work alone or in a team?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? How many days was it?
How was your day today until you said, I'm able to work? Like,
I think he's referring to when was the day that you decided that you were able to do the work, right? Like,
yeah, or how long? Or
Yeah,
something like this.
yes, how long?
that's a tough one. I think in some cases I have had the benefit of
We have some connection problems. Oops. Okay. Oof. Jason, we can't hear you or see you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Sorry, everybody. It looks like Jason is having internet problems.
Hopefully, can you hear me now?
Okay, is he
Hello?
back?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, now
Oh my
you're
God.
back.
I'm so sorry about this, everybody. Oh boy. Don't live in old apartments if you want to be able to do these kind of calls. I'm really, really sorry about this.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can answer that one and then wrap things up, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, up to you. So the question was what was my day-to-day like before I felt comfortable with any kind of task? Yeah.
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 Sorry, I don't know how much you heard. I would talk for a minute about this.
Oh,
It's okay. I was saying so I think I had the benefit of being a bit naive when I was more junior. So for example, like I was saying, when I was a student, I would just come across problems and go, I can code anything. It's all code. I can code whatever I want. And I just kept taking on harder and harder problems. So I don't know that I've ever particularly stopped and thought, oh yeah, now I'm comfortable. I'm doing good. Now when I look back, I think, okay, well, there's a lot of my work that I do that I look at some tasks that a couple of years ago would have been really hard, and now I go, ooh, I know exactly how to do that. But I keep doing harder things, so the tasks I do today, I don't know how to do very well. And in 2 years, I'll look back at those and say, oh, those are so easy. So I think similar to the first question, um, I think it's helpful to accept that it will always be hard and things will always be challenging, and we'll just keep learning. And the part that, if you're a student, the part that you're doing right now of learning, how to teach yourself, how to solve problems, how to debug, how to think in the engineering mindset to kind of solve your way through things is the most important part. Because if you're hoping that you're going to study for a year and then work as a junior developer for a year or two, and then you'll know it all, it's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to be learning for absolutely the rest of your life, because even if you today feel like, you know what, I am the best person in the world on React. I'm like top of the barrel for React. I'm everything. I know it all. Well, React's not going to be around forever. It's not going to be the coolest thing. In 10 years, no one's going to talk about React. I do a lot of work with infrastructure. I work a lot on things like Docker and Kubernetes. Kubernetes 2 years ago was the most advanced thing. Everyone was like, holy shit, this Kubernetes thing is crazy. It's going nuts. It's so hard, so complicated. In 5 years, no one's going to care about Kubernetes because there'll be new technologies that take its place and are more advanced, and there will be something else that comes in. And the skills that allowed me to learn about that will hopefully allow me to learn about whatever thing comes next.
that's very good advice. And I saw some people asking if you could leave your social media so they can contact you, because they have a lot of questions and maybe we won't have the time to ask all of them. But can you write on the chat your contact?
I'll write them in the chat. I'm happy to answer anyone's questions. You can, you can see the spelling of my name, so I'll just tell you right now, and then I'll go into the chat afterwards and type them out. I'm just my full name, Jason Gwartz, on Twitter and also on LinkedIn. But I get a lot of spam on LinkedIn, so if you want, it's hard to get my attention. But you can, if you leave a message, I'll know who you are. But Twitter DM is good. You can also email me. My email address is my first name, Jason @Gwartz, my last name, .me. So jason@Gwartz.me. You can email me there too. Yeah, thank you for listening, everybody. I hope I was able to answer as some of the questions, and I hope if you write to me, I can answer some more.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of questions, but we have to go now. But thank you so much for joining us, and it was a very interesting talk. And also for the rest of you, don't forget to join next week's webinar. It's going to be on, exactly 1 week, February the 7th. It's going to be also very interesting. And, well, I'll see you later. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Radwan.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.